Hey y'all, welcome to Race Kiki's with Jonathan Lee. I'm Jonathan Lee. How are you? Thank you for coming. This week's episode is with my friend Michael from Colorado. Um, I met him X number of years ago when he was figuring life out, beating mugs, doing drag, working at a bookstore. Cut to a couple of years, many years later, he moved to New York. He went to FIT. He's just got back from Italy. He's this beautiful minimalist fashion designer. I love the minimalist fashion aesthetic. It's just so elegant, sophisticated. Anyway, I digress. We talk, oddly enough, not at all about fashion. We talk about race because Michael is a Hispanic young man. Well, he's half Hispanic and half white. And I wanted to understand, I wanted to talk about what it was like for him growing up and his relationship with race and the ins and outs. This is a beautiful, open, touching chat that I'm so honored to have had. I hope you enjoy it. Please like and subscribe, and I can't wait for you guys to see this chat. Enjoy. Hey, Michael, welcome to Race Kiki's.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. Just making it through every day. So, trying.
All right. What is on the cocktail drink for the evening?
Iced coffee.
Iced coffee. Well, since it's a happy hour, I am having vodka soda, splash of crayon.
Ooh.
House drink.
I have plenty of a bar to try and attend, but I am attempting more of the sober experience at this current time.
I know a lot of people who told me that they were doing a sober January. And yeah. I told them that was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I wish them the very best, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah, it was just a rough holidays. And then I went to brunch with one of my friends, and yeah, after that I was like, okay, yeah, no, we're gonna try and be sober for at least a week. That'll be ending tomorrow, unfortunately.
I got you. We haven't been to brunch in so long, I think I forget what it's like. I make brunch, but I can't remember the last time we went out to brunch.
Yeah, this was the first time I've been out to like brunch, if you will. It was literally just me and my friend eating, like
that's
outside.
The point. There was alcohol there, and it was around brunch time.
Yeah,
brunch. I get it.
Yeah, so it wasn't like the full on like woohoo, but it was a little woohoo.
Michael, I have a question for you.
Yes.
When did you learn about race?
Like, in what respect?
In any respect. Like, when did you learn about race?
Learn about it?
Yep.
I don't know if I can really pinpoint a specific time that I learned about race. I know there was I was very, very young, like maybe 4 or 5 when I acknowledged race.
What do you mean?
So, okay. I guess, I don't know, it's like for me, like, so there's learning about race, which is kind of learning the ins and outs about it, or there's like for me, it's more of an acknowledgement of it, because growing up, like I grew up in a Hispanic household.
Mm-hmm.
with
In Colorado, yes.
yes, in Colorado. I grew up in a Hispanic household in Colorado with my family's very diverse. My grandmother had 7 children. Not all of them had the same father,
It happens.
you know. But we had a lot of diversity, like there was various skin tones in my family and various features that were, there. And then my mother had my sister, and then she had me. And my sister's father is African American, and my father is potentially white. So, like growing up, there was a lot of various things that were said about us. Like it was never hidden that my father was white and that my sister's father was black.
Okay. Explain.
Um,
Did you treat your sister differently than you?
yeah, a little bit. Like my sister definitely got a little bit of a different treatment. And I don't know if it was necessarily that she was. I think it's less that like I feel like I had different treatment because of my father, because of like my mixed heritage. Um, because for me it was always like it was always pointed out that I was, you know, often my family just called me white.
Okay.
So that was always kind of pushed to the forefront growing up within my family, that I was lighter. And, I was like I had the lightest skin in my family. I was the one that they kind of pushed the most for education.
Interesting.
Which I think also plays a little bit into the fact that I was, I was a very light-skinned male in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And like my sister and I went to the exact same school. Exact same middle school, elementary school, high school. Um, and it was just, it was very interesting because like for me, it was always like, oh, you can achieve whatever you want. Oh my, like, and I also like, my elementary school was Dora Moore. Do you remember that school across the street from Queen Supers?
Oh, yes, I do.
That was my elementary and middle school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That was a strange place to go to elementary school, and that was a strange place because there was an awful lot of homosexuality happening on that corner. Awful lot.
You're telling me, but my family's whole homosexual journey,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
so it makes the most sense that we would live there. Um, not only is it very homosexual, it's also very middle. I don't know. I want to say it's a little bit more on the middle class side, and it was a lot closer to the money side of Capitol Hill.
True.
Mm-hmm. And all implications of that being, whiter and everything like that.
Whiter meaning better.
Yeah, I think so. Like I'm fairly certain that I'm fairly certain. I know that my family kept me there as much as they could because they knew that the education I would receive there was better. Like they knew that I would receive the privilege of being in that neighborhood with those students in that school.
Mm-hmm. Were there other Hispanic children in the school with you?
There were, but they were very few. Very few. The minorities in our school were very limited because there was Dora Moore, which was the school that I went to, and then there was Morey Middle School, which was right up on like 14th and Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
And Morey Middle School was closer to Colfax and Broadway and like the lower end of town, of Capitol Hill. You know, that was the bad side, if you will.
Mhm.
So most of the time people like that's where the minorities were living, and so that's where they went to school. And so I like my family kept me there, and you didn't get a lot of the minority there. Like we had, I think at one point I remember being in class and there was only one other Hispanic in my class, and then there was one, we had one Hispanic, one Chinese, one Black in my class. And that was like, that stayed with me for a while. Like that was about 2 or 3 years worth of school. That there was just that. And it was funny. Not funny. It was, so this is kind of, speaking to how I was raised. I grew up there. I went to school with this very obvious lack of minorities. And looking for the longest time, I would look back on it and I was like, gosh, I think there was only ever one Hispanic person in my school. Yeah, I can't really like think of much. We didn't have much diversity. Never taking into account that I was Hispanic in our school.
That was going to be my very next question. That was, why do you think that that's how you thought?
Because of the fact, like, I mean, my friends were all
White
my
kids.
friends were all pretty much white, and my family very much so pushed on the fact that I was white. Like, there was one, like, there was a point where, like, it was. I'm trying to think of how to say this without sounding completely horrible, but I guess I'll just be blunt.
Yeah,
About
you're
it,
safe.
which is,
It's fine.
so I was in school. We had to transfer schools for a brief period, and I was sitting in the library of this other school, and some of the kids that were in my class were standing off nearby, um, and they were joking, making fun of me, and they were making fun of the fact that I was Hispanic. And I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but the only reason why I know that they were making fun of the fact that I was Hispanic is because I got really upset and I looked at them. I said, "No, I'm not. I'm a honky, just like you." And the only reason why, and I thought it was perfectly fine and to say, because that's what my mom would say. That's what my mom would say, and that's what she would call me. She'd be like, "You're just a little hunky." Like I was like being white was pushed that hard on me, and obviously not in the kindest of ways, but it was in my family. Like my family wasn't being PC by any means about it. And looking back on it, I'm just like, oh. And I remember the kids busted out laughing. They're like, "Oh my God." Like they couldn't believe that I had just called them and me that at the same time. I was like, "But my mom says that. Like that's what my mom says." Now my mom's from Texas. Like she's Hispanic from Texas. Now keep in mind my birth mother died when I was 3. So I was raised by my grandmother. So the mentality was different. The stories were different, the way that we were brought up. And I was raised by my uncles and aunts as well. And they had a very direct relationship with my grandmother, obviously, because that's their mom. So yeah, for her saying that was fine, you know. But yeah, so that's why I think I just never really like I knew I was Hispanic, but it was never something that like I think that I thought I was supposed to be white. Like, I think that that's what I felt like I was supposed to identify as and I was supposed to be. Because it was just such a push. You know?
I've heard that before. I've heard that it's just easier for you to just be white.
Yeah, because and I know that was why my family was so. They tried to keep it and like put like make sure that I understood. Like they didn't try to make sure that I understood necessarily that being white was easier, but they tried to make sure that I utilized the color of my skin, the fact that I had this other half of me, this white half that had like made me passable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it allowed me to blend in to areas that would probably have not like that I know would not have seen me as kindly. Which is and it's also very interesting because I know growing up in my school, like we had such an array of teachers and they were really the most kind and caring people, and the education that we received was really they tried to give it to everybody. Now I know that the location of the school had a lot to do with that, but I should have like it makes me sad now to look back on because I'm like I should have never been ashamed of my last name, about where I grew up and how I grew up, but my family made me feel that way. And that was that was very hard, but that's what I mean like growing up I acknowledged race very early. Like I acknowledged it and I saw it because I was constantly a white child in a Hispanic household with a half black sister.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I had uncles that were a lot more like they had more Native American in them. I had other ones that leaned more Spanish. There was no shortage in my household of referring to people by the color of their skin. You know, there was never like I used to try and correct my mother often growing up about like you can't call her that, like you can't you know can't call this woman this like or that like just based on the color of their skin. And yeah, it was very it's very interesting because I think because I heard it so much and because I saw it so much I was just overtly aware of race around me,
Uh-huh.
but I was always extra confused about the race of me.
How about now?
It's
Do you have an attachment to your Hispanic culture?
I think that I've been trying to make a connection to it. I've been trying to hold on to more to it because I realized that I didn't really like I didn't value the fact that I had this very rich Hispanic culture behind me. I was raised in it. It was literally everywhere that I looked, but I never really took like I never really paid that much attention, and I just didn't really have much connection because I was like, well, that's Hispanic, like that's Spanish, you know. I'm not Spanish. Like I'm not supposed to be doing these things. Like, you know, I was raised to value white values, if you will. You know, like, oh well, make sure that you know how to which fork to use when you go to, you know, these upper class restaurants that we're like my uncles worked in restaurants a lot. And so for them, they wanted to make sure that I could blend into
White
that
society.
white society, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was just so ingrained in me to try and like fit in, to blend in, to do these things, that it made it hard to value, I guess, some of my own cultural like history that I grew up in. But now I feel as though I'm really trying to hold on to it more, because I'm tired of feeling ashamed of half of who I am, especially since it's that. Yeah, because I don't like. I mean, you grow up thinking like, oh well, if anybody knows that like my last name is Gutierrez and that I'm, that I grew up in a household where like we ate chili and burritos and like we didn't have a lot of money, like all the associations, like you grow up and you're not supposed to let anybody know that, because if they know that, they're going to look down on you.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like I think that I've just become so tired of feeling that way, and I want to like I feel like I want to embrace more of who I am and like who I really am and who I grew up as. And there should be no shame in the fact that I have this rich history. Like there is so much to be proud of, so much to love and embrace and pull forward. Like if I allow this, if I allow the fact that my family wanted me to be as white as possible to continue to kind of overtake everything, then I'm going to lose so many traditions. I'm going to lose so much of what I grew up as and what made my family. And that's just, so yeah. So I think I'm trying to embrace it more. And it really kind of has been driven home a lot more now that since I moved to New York, especially, about kind of embracing your history and acknowledging not only not only am I Hispanic, but where's the Hispanic from?
Mm-hmm.
Which is it, I find very funny.
What was it about New York that sparked this curiosity for you?
Diversity. Denver, Colorado in general, for me did not I thought it had diversity.
No, it didn't. It was just different shades of white.
Yeah, there was, and it was, it was very it was exceptionally segregated.
Mm-hmm.
Your neighborhoods were your neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
You knew where to find who. But once I moved to New York, there was just so much more diversity here that was just packed in together, and it can be very unavoidable to interact and see these things. And I remember I was working at this tiny little restaurant the first summer that I moved here, and I was in the kitchen and I was doing the dishes, and it was this little Italian restaurant. Everybody in the kitchen was various Hispanics. And we're all talking, and everybody's talking Spanish, and my family raised me in a household where the only Spanish they spoke was that then my sister and I did not know what they were saying.
Okay. So you didn't learn Spanish as a child?
No.
Okay.
No, I learned through school,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not learn through my family. The words that I learned were the not nice words.
I also have I have a couple of friends whose parents were immigrants to the country from Mexico, and they refused to teach their children, well, from what they told me, they refused to teach their children Spanish because they didn't want the white people or anyone else to look down on them. Since their children were also fairly fair complected, this friend was a fair complected Mexican fella who spoke out not a word of Spanish.
Yeah. And I think that there was some of that where I don't think that my mom wanted me to have the battles, being a Spanish speaking child in a school that spoke English. And you could also see it too, because my uncles and aunts, they're Spanish. Almost, it's bad. Like they can speak more than I can, but it was like they could not communicate with my great grandmother. They could not have a conversation with her. Their Spanish is so horribly broken because they just were not required to speak it. My grandmother did not teach it to them that much. And I think that is probably a lot of what was happening, was she was just trying to give them a fighting chance, if you will.
That's sad.
It is, because I mean, I think we know that if you can speak Spanish, if you can, it's actually very beneficial.
Well, now,
Now,
20 years ago, not so much. 30 years ago, absolutely not. 40 years ago, get out of my country.
yes.
And that would have been around the time, well, your uncles are probably a whisper older than I, so somewhere around there.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, and it makes sense, that we just did not have a lot of Spanish in the house. And yeah, I did not learn it very much, but I remember everybody was speaking Spanish, and somebody had seen my last name, I think. And but for like the longest time, everybody was talking in Spanish around me, but they did not try to talk to me in Spanish. I think they maybe tried to say one or two things, and I looked at them and they were just like, never mind. Why are you in this kitchen? And I was like, okay. And then one of the guys was having a conversation as I was doing the dishes, and he looks at me and he goes, "So, where are you from?" He's like, "We like your last name," and I was like, "My last name is Gutierrez." And he's like, "But you don't speak Spanish," and I was like, "Not really, not that much." And he's like, "But okay, so you're," I was like, "I'm half Hispanic, half white," and he goes, "Okay, where's your like where from?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Well, I'm from Colorado." And he goes, "No, where from? Where like Puerto Rico, Mexico, where is your Hispanic?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Oh," I was like, "Well, my family comes from like Spain. Like that's where the Spanish comes from." And he looked and he goes, "Oh, don't tell anybody else in this kitchen that, because we can't be friends." I was like, "What are you talking?" And he was just like, he's like, "I'm kidding." He's like, "But people from Spain aren't really liked here." He's like, "So you might not want to tell anybody that that's your Spanish." And I was like, "Okay." But that kind of made me like have this realization that I was just like, I do have like this whole Hispanic side. And since then, I've heard people ask the difference between, where does that come from? Like, where's Gutierrez from? Like, what, like I could say, "Oh, I'm from Colorado." And they're like, no, but where are you from?
Right.
And
right.
I'm like,
Have you done a DNA test?
I have not. My sister did. I did not. But
Okay.
ours obviously will be very different since we have different fathers.
Right. I did one earlier. Well, for Scott got me one for my birthday last year, and it came back with a lot of very interesting things. It all boiled down to I'm an American descendant of slavery, where the majority of my heritage is Nigerian and Cameroon and around that general area, with some Portugal and Welsh or something. It was some Swedish. I have 1% Swedish, and that all makes sense because slave masters.
Yes.
Slave masters. How are you getting your introduction into your heritage?
I mean, there's not like, I don't know, like for me, I'm kind of just starting by trying to remember things that my mom did and little like traditions and stories that she would tell us about, like, you know, growing up and stuff like that. Like, for me, I think the first thing for that, like, for my culture is, like, my grandmother was our culture. And so I'm just trying to remember a lot of those and kind of reclaim them and remember them and stuff like that. And I'm trying to, like, listen more to Spanish music, because music for me is very, like, personal, and it also is just something that I hold so dear. So I want to listen to more, like, Spanish music in order to kind of feel a little bit more connected, because that's just like, that just, I don't know. It does a lot of things.
Okay, I get that. It kind of sparks something inside of your body.
Yeah.
I get
And
that.
it just, I like it because I feel like I'm slightly able to, like, randomly feed, you know, more of the Hispanic side of me with Spanish music and the beats and the, you know, I may not understand anything that's being said, but you know, it's something. So
Well,
just little things like that.
I could only suggest one thing: unsolicited advice. The reason why, well, it was a rumor, shall I say, in my family, that we were Native American. My great grandmother was a very, very fair complected woman, jet black hair, very, very angular face. Or maybe she was a brunette. I'm not, in my memory, she's a jet black hair, but that could have been her church wig. Either way, um, and I always remember the family saying we were Native American. We were Native American. And that's what I always assumed. So
Mhm.
I take this DNA test and have none of that show up. And it literally blew my mind. And then when I called my mother and they said, "Hey, mom, guess what?" It blew her mind, so much so that she needed a couple of days to collect her thoughts before we could talk. So, if nothing more, I knew that my family was connected through slavery. I knew that. But having this having the results, like, in my hand, it just cements the fact that my ancestors died they were bought and sold and died in this country.
Yeah.
And that is, I don't know, it's a remarkable thing to honor every single day, to know that my ancestors gave their life to the service of this nation, not of their own free will.
Yeah.
Not of their own free will, but they did it so that we could all be here. Some of us more successful than others.
Yeah.
Because at the time they weren't considered people.
Yeah. Which, yeah.
Yeah.
Mildly reminds me of a story that I don't know if I ever shared it with you, about my grandmother growing up, because she grew up during the time of, you know, segregation and everything like that. And it's part of, I think, what really kind of, for me growing up, caused such a weird, I don't know, it was such a mess in my head, because I knew who my grandmother could be, who she was, and I know who she turned into when it comes to race. And it but it was a story about the fact that, like, so she grew up and she worked in restaurants as well, a lot. And so, you know, you she was able to serve, do all the things, but if you were black, you couldn't eat in the restaurants.
Mhm.
And she was there at work one day, and this black guy came in, and he sat down to eat. I'm not sure what the whole like base of the story was, but her boss came up to her and said, "I'm sorry, you need to go and tell this man that he needs to come around to the back and get his food. He can eat in the back of the restaurant, like basically in the alley."
Mhm.
And my mom looked at him and, huh?
That's standard practice.
Right. And my mom she's like, I looked at him and I just told him, you go tell him. And he's like, no, he's like, he can't eat in here. And she goes, well, you tell him that because I'm not going to tell him that. And I'm actually going to like, here's my apron. I'm done. And she walked out of her job because she refused to live that and like have to like be the person to do this. And I was like, wow, like that to me was a very strong story. Because I was like, wow, like you stood up for it. She didn't grow up with money at all. And she like gave her job up in order to not like, to just be like, I don't stand for this.
Mm-hmm.
So, head. Oh, go ahead.
Did that translate into raising you with zero anti-black bias?
What do you mean?
Meaning, do you remember with that being a statement of your mother, walking out from not serving a gentleman, not telling a guy he couldn't eat there? Did she then raise you to believe that black people were equal to everyone else as well?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. And that's why I said like it messed with my head because I knew that she cared and that this was something that she did.
Mm-hmm.
But then somewhere along the lines as like time passed, her views started to change and she started to become racist.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't racism just towards black people. It was racism to everybody. You know, now this was a woman who like, I mean, she told me that she also was like, oh, I loved tall white men. She told me that a lot growing up. She's like, you know, they would always love me. She's like, they always come for me. She's like, and he was such a beautiful, tall white man. And I'm like, oh, okay, you do like, you know that okay, weird. But then later, I would hear her make slurs and curse people for being white, for being Hispanic, for being black, for being Chinese, for being, you name it, she had something to say about them. There was always something. And it did not matter. It was just, there was a racist remark or bias against everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she like in one hand, she would be like, oh, you know, you look white, or you're white, da da da. Like you know, everybody's so happy that you're going to this white school. You have white friends, they have money, blah blah blah. And then at the same time, she would cuss out somebody at the store and be like, "Oh, it's your white people. They don't know what they're talking about." Da, da. And I'm like, "Mom,
I'm confused."
I'm confused."
Yes, I have several questions, Nana. Several questions.
Mm-hmm. And then if she would start throwing around, you know, things about like black people, I'd also be like, can we please talk about my half black, half Hispanic sister who's standing right there?
Who's hearing all of this, and I wonder how that affected your sister.
I don't know.
Yeah.
My sister, I don't know how she dealt with most of it. Cause I mean, I was light skinned, but she has, you know, darker skin than me, and she looks the least like, I can't even really say that.
I've seen your sister. She's beautiful.
Oh, she is.
Yeah,
she's absolutely beautiful. She has a lot of my mom's features.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that like if you see a family picture of us, like if you look at a picture of her and me next to each other, usually most people are like, wait, that's not your sister. Like, and so I'm wondering how that actually impacted her to like, she grew up and people would call her Indian. She got mistaken for Indian a lot. Um, but like, yeah, I don't know. It's like I said, my grandmother, my mom, she would make lots of those comments. But then so did most of my other family members. It was never very pleasant, if you will, growing up in my household because of the different race and even the way that they treated each other. Like my sister definitely got. There were more arguments. Like, I mean, we can be a little bit stubborn, but like there was a lot more arguments and things would be said to her that definitely would not have been said to me. And I saw like even between like my uncles and aunts, like they would shame the heck out of each other for the color of their skin. Like the ones who were darker that had more Native American blood, oh my God, they were horribly shamed. Like they were, I think they were considered like the lesser ones, which is really dumb, but happens. So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And
I
this is,
I have a vague memory of I have three sisters, three absolutely beautiful sisters. All three of my sisters are of a fairer complexion than I. And I remember a relative of ours saying, "Ooh, you would be so handsome if you weren't so black." And I would also have a family member, every time they were over and it was time for me to take a bath, they would sneak bleach in my water so that my skin would lighten. Now, that's one or two incidences that I remember. I can only imagine what a lifetime of anti-blackness in a household can do for anyone. Because as a black person, I can get anti-blackness everywhere else, but the minute I get it in my home, I can't escape it. I can't go anywhere.
yeah. So it's there. It's interesting to have it from the people who are supposed to be the closest and most supporting and
Supposed
loving
to
of you.
love you. Supposed to be your champion. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would like yeah. And I think there's a small part of me that counts myself very lucky to have engaged it the way that I did in my head, because I could have very easily become just like them. I was raised by them. Like every single one of them had some part in me, in raising me and what I thought, what I felt. There was still something though growing up that no matter what, it just didn't feel right. No matter like I said, very small, I saw and I acknowledged that there was different races, there was different colors. But because I also saw along the path that we like, even within my own family, that there was so many different, colors of skin, backgrounds, whatever, it just furthered, and like the fact, like it just furthered to me that I'm like, we're why are you like, why would you have, like, why would you say these things about anybody based on the color of their skin when that person could be anybody? Like, they're like, it made me angry at how bad of people I was surrounded by. Instead of being like, oh, well, this is just how you treat people, you know, like I was like, no, like this isn't right. That's not what you do. Like, you should, like, I should never have to sit there and watch, you know, my sister be berated for the color of her skin when she's my sister. Like,
And not even okay, I that's absolutely true, but then we remove sister and just say she's a human.
right, exactly.
Human. And how do you think that you would react if you were her for just a day?
Right.
We saw what happened. We saw what happened in the country when a bunch of grown adult babies didn't get their way and they tried to burn down the nation. We saw that. And that is from just coddling these delusions of superiority for the entire inception of this country. It has been a lie built on white supremacy, the entire nation, everything about it. Hey.
Sorry, he's getting ready to go to work.
So I think that, because I was talking to someone earlier about this, do you think that if we spend the time and do the work that we need to dismantle all of the white supremacy in this country, do you think that everyone's up for the work, or is it easier to just let it go back to where it used to be?
So, what do you mean by is everyone up for the work?
Meaning, you know that our country cannot return to the way that it operated prior to May. No, our country can't go back to the way that it operated before this coronavirus. It can't.
Right.
I truly believe that everything that happened last year with us being inside, being focused on the state of this nation, and we see people in food lines for hours on end because they are 2 or 3 or 4 paychecks away from poverty. We see peaceful protesters being met with the military while wily coyotes go up and burn the Capitol down. We see people their rights being stripped away every single minute. There's no reason why everyone in this country doesn't have health insurance. There's no reason for that. There's no reason for a Black woman to earn 61 cents to every white man's dollar. There's no reason for that. There's no reason for the white woman to earn 70 some odd cents to the white man's dollar, and the Black man 81 cents to the white man's dollar. There's no reason for that.
Right.
We can't, now that we all see it, how can we go back? Because if we go back, what that's telling us is all of those people who died in vain. that nearly 400,000 people died in vain
Mhm.
to go back to a broken system.
Right.
That makes no sense.
Makes none at all to go
So
back to it.
what I mean by the work is we all have to make a solemn obligation to look at our circles of influence and see what part we play in the white supremacist narrative of this country, and then agree not to do it anymore, not to play that part.
Yeah. Give me 1 sec, okay?
Sure. Mhm.
To try and get him out the door.
I understand. If my hubby and I weren't joined at the hip, I would have to do that more frequently.
I'm
I
like,
don't think we've probably been apart a total of 5 days since, well, if you boil it down into hours, it might factor down to maybe 2.5 days. But he's gone out for like 5, had to do some background work on like 5 different things. So he went away 5 different times.
okay.
And then we had to give him a flea dip and get him all hosed down. He went like deep in Brooklyn to go film some stuff. And then he came back. He was like, okay, babe, I need you to take like 6 showers and wash your hands and wash your hair and wash your teeth and wash your face and wash your lips. And then we can hang out.
Oh, can you imagine if I had to do that every time he came and went to
No,
work?
I can't. But I'm also a hypochondriac.
He would like, I would have to just give him an acid dip.
Uh-huh. Hi, baby.
Just be like, it's at the door. See you later. Good luck.
Well, but that was basically, that's where I am in this future.
Yeah. So I will say that I do not like, by no means on any level do I think that we can go back to the way that things were prior to this. I don't think that we can. I don't think that we should. I think that it would be one of the most unhealthy decisions ever. And if we did do that, then we would literally be putting a huge stamp of okay on a world that is obviously not. And I think that there's a lot of people who you can't unexperience what has been experienced.
Correct.
So I think that for many people, it will forever change them. Hopefully, most of them for the better. I do not believe that we have an entire nation that is up for the challenge of trying to create and work towards something that is better. I think that is apparent in what we have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Have half a nation, if you will, that just would rather be angry and fight for what used to be because they think that it was better. I think it's very close-minded, and I think that it is a delusional way of continuing to live your life. But we have it, it exists, it has been fostered, and it has been fed so much so that you can't change the way that some people are unless they are open to change.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of people in this country and in this world who are willing to change. They do see opportunities. They don't see change as something that is scary, that is going to take away something from them. They see change as an opportunity to gain something. But so I do think that there are people who are willing to put in the work, that can put in the work, who will do these things. And I hope they do. I hope we all do. I hope that we try to make this better. I hope that we try to gain something from this. But
That only works if everyone, if those people, shall I say, are committed to doing the work. And sometimes that work is going to get incredibly uncomfortable because it forces you to deal with your bias, because we all have them.
Mhm.
We all have conscious and unconscious bias that we're walking around with. And when it's confronted, when someone calls you out on it, most people's natural reaction is to get defensive,
Mhm.
as opposed to acknowledging the fact that I am human, therefore I am flawed. I am also open to input so I can change and be a better human.
Yeah.
I have more frequently than not always been the one to call somebody a racist when they're being a racist. Now, when I say you are being a racist right now, what you said is racist. I am not saying that you are a racist. I am saying your actions and your words are racist. Here is the opportunity for you to learn and make sure that you don't make this mistake again. However, if you continue to make these mistakes, it becomes a pattern of behavior. And then it goes from what you're doing is racist to you are a racist.
Right. Because you're
You
openly choosing to continue a pattern that you know is racist,
racist.
which means that you say, that's fine. That's what I want.
That's who I am. And as Maya Angelou once said, when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
So, yes. Yeah, I mean, I've had those conversations with family members.
How does that? Well, no, let me ask you one other question. How did you feel about your cultural identity after returning to the United States from living abroad?
My cultural identity.
And that could mean anything from your Hispanicness to your whiteness to your Americanness, whatever you deem as a cultural identity.
I think I felt, so I know that I felt more inclined to try and connect with my Hispanic cult, like my Spanish background, because I did get to visit Spain, and that to me was actually a very monumental thing for me. Um, I I just like I remember going and I looked like I was in a random like souvenir shop, and I was looking for things, and I was looking for keychains, and I saw my name, my last name on a keychain there, and I like saw like the thing, and I was just like it just like it hit home for me. It just made me like I actually almost started crying because I was like, this is where my name comes from. These are people that, you know, this is a history that's technically for me it's lost. You know, it's a history that was mentioned but never actually spoken about.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me, I was like, you know, I really feel like I want to try and investigate this more. I do want to be more connected with the Spanish portion of me. Um, as far as the white, like the Caucasian side of me, I don't like, it didn't really do a ton as far as like making me feel more connected. Nor did it make me feel more ashamed of being half Caucasian by any means, half white. It did bring in a moment of realization to me, though, where I realized, because before, you know, I thought so much within the borders of the United States. Like I thought within the US as far as regards to who I was, what I identified as.
Mhm.
I didn't really think outside of it, except for the fact that like, oh, there's this little part of you that's in Spain. And then I think I realized that even within like the white side of me, there's this part that I've always just kind of brushed off, which is the unidentified. My father does, my father does not exist in my life. He doesn't even know I was born.
Okay.
So my family did not know him.
Mm-hmm.
They just, someone met him, I think once, and they were like, oh, your father's white. Okay, cool. They think
Wow.
they think they know his last name,
Uh-huh.
and that was, yeah.
Have you
So
ever been curious about him?
I was in my teens. I was curious about him because I was always really lost, kind of with my identity growing up, as far as like my mom passed away when I was very young. My father never knew I existed.
Mhm.
And so, and yet I was like there was this side of me that was constantly pushed to the forefront. You're white, you're the light skin. Like, oh, you've got white friends. Oh, go live white culture, go live white life, blah, blah, blah. Not white culture, sorry, that's not a thing. White life. Like, there was always this thing that I was supposed to be taking advantage of from this person who, one, didn't know that I existed. Two, I had no idea who they were.
Mhm.
Three, they could not identify where this person came from.
Mhm.
And I was like, so I was very curious about who this was. So I tried to like, do some internet searches back in the day.
Mhm.
And I couldn't, like, I found something that I thought was maybe a lead, but I was so young that I just didn't follow through on what it was that I like, who he was. Cause I think they said his last name was Crouch.
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 Okay.
That's what they're pretty sure his last name was.
Okay. Okay.
And that he owned a car dealership.
Okay.
Two things you would think that should narrow down. Not as easy as you would think. No, it is not. And I was like, so I was curious. And then there was also a part of me that was terribly afraid of going and trying to like figure out who this person was, and then the fallout or follow through that could happen with that. My mother never told him that I was born because she was terrified that he would take me away from her because he had money and she did not. He was white and she was not.
Oh.
Yeah.
This
So
sounds like a Lifetime movie, and I don't mean to trivialize your life. I swear I don't. I just think it would be delicious. You could dress everybody there. We'll get somebody to write the lines. You can do the hair and makeup. Girl, you're going to be busy.
I know. Yeah.
You can play yourself in all the roles if you want to. You can play your mom. You can play your grandma. You can play yourself as a baby. It'll be fabulous.
This could be quite a thing. We might need to talk about this one later.
Well, I told Scott that when we do the movie of my life, no matter how old I am, when we produce this movie, I'm going to play myself the entire time. Like from infancy all the way to however old I am, and everyone in the scene has to act like I'm whatever. If I'm supposed to be a baby, I will be sitting there as a 56-year-old with little afro wig on and my little pull-ups, goo goo gagaing and such, but still talking exactly the way I talk, and everybody's going to have to react like I'm a baby. It's going to be ridiculous. It'll be a drama.
Drama. I'm not too sure what I think about the drama. Okay. I could see some drama in there. Yeah. Okay.
Because most of it will be everybody in the scene with me having to keep a straight face.
You'll be on the edge of your seat going, is someone going to break? Come on, somebody please acknowledge that he's a grown ass man.
Especially when I'm like hanging on the hip of this whomever this woman is who has to play me, Cynthia Erivo, who has to play my mother. I'm strapped on the hip of Cynthia Erivo's little tiny self. That is not going to be cute. I'm going to love every second of it.
Oh, I feel like she's going to have like a handle or something nearby, like just to brace herself and be like, I got this. Hey, look at my baby. I love it.
Well, Marlene, thank you very much for this. Was a really, really, really awesome chat.
I've enjoyed it. Yes.
Thank you very much for your vulnerability and your honesty. I sincerely appreciate getting to learn about this part of you.
Thanks. If you're ever curious, there's plenty more.
And yeah, I appreciate you.
Well, thank you for having this conversation with me. It's nice. There's many things that I don't get to talk about or think about often, and I know that is kind of the point of this. So
that's the point of it. And then it also, what would be more interesting for me is for you and your sister to have a conversation. Look at that face. You're all like,
I don't really know if I can have that conversation with my sister.
I can't wait to have all three of my sisters on at the same time. And we talk about, because they're three beautiful Black women raising fantastic, well, one of them has raised all of her children and the other two are raising fantastic young humans, young, accomplished, incredible humans in Mississippi. And I want to talk about that.
Oh, I would love to see that. I met your sisters, at least two of them.
Probably Jennifer and Jessica.
Yeah, I think that sounds, yeah. They're lovely.
They are.
But yes, no, I would definitely enjoy getting to hear about that, because I'm always curious about that side of your life. You know, getting to like, you know, I hear little stories here and there, but I've never actually, aside from the one time, I've never really gotten to see you guys engage with each other. So I feel like it'll
have a fantastic rest of your night, my friend.
You as well.
Be wonderful, and I will chat with you soon.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, have a good night.
Night.
Steve, my love.
I will.